Welcome to Builders, the podcast for leaders who want to build great companies. I'm your host, Alex Snyder, strategic advisor to world-class builders. This podcast dives into the wild rides and personal transformations that come with pursuing big dreams and becoming a leader who builds incredible teams and companies. Each episode, I'm joined by a guest who helps deliver a fresh perspective designed to leave you feeling less lonely, more connected to innovative ideas, and inspired about growing your business your way. If you enjoy the show, don't forget to subscribe on your favorite channel, leave us a 5-star review, and share your favorite episode with a friend. The podcast is sponsored by Alex Snyder Advisory. If you are a business leader or executive team ready to take your leadership and company to the next level with a high-performing team, we'd love to see how we can rocket fuel your growth. Check out the show notes to book your free Builders Business Booster call, where you'll receive a strategic leadership audit and 3 concrete focus areas to mature and grow your business. All right, thanks for tuning in. Let's build. Welcome, Charlie. Welcome, everyone who's joining us. Thank you. I'm so excited to have you on here and a little nervous. I've yet to have a guest who knows me as well or who has as much shared history as we do. Before we jump in, I just actually want to ask you, how shocked are you that I could even get this fancy streaming set up?
Yeah, no, I'm surprised every week. You have some sort of weird Wi-Fi thing that just basically destroys all technology within a 10-foot radius. So the fact that you're streaming and you're podcasting now just blows my mind. It's very impressive.
We had a really running joke about the irony of we ran a tech company together and tech hates me. So really, I just invited you on here to show you that I've grown. That's
Yeah,
it. We're good. We're done.
I'm sure did. Rats.
Yeah. Okay, so no pressure introducing you. You are the incarnation of a serial entrepreneur. You are an extremely creative human with a touch of shiny object syndrome and a lot of energy. And you put that towards business, but also you're a comedy enthusiast. You have won multiple medals as a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu enthusiast at aficionado. You love kiteboarding and getting out and about. I would say your curiosity knows no bounds, and you really have a determination and a tenacity that's quite unparalleled. So I know your story pretty well. You're welcome. I know your story pretty well, but I think you tell it best. You're such a great storyteller. So I'm going to just ask you in this case to introduce yourself, give a bit of your story for those who are listening to get to know you before we dive into nitty gritty of the entrepreneur stuff.
Sure. Thank you for that glowing introduction. Yes, I am a serial entrepreneur. I never thought of myself as that. But even when I was a kid, I would look at what my dad would do and I would read the business section of the newspaper, even though I was 8 and I had no idea what I was reading. And I thought, this is fun. Look at all these people doing things with businesses and numbers and moving things around and buying shares and thinking of ideas. And I thought it was always neat. So it was on my radar to do that of some sort. And I didn't really know what path my career would take when I moved to Toronto I finished my MBA and moved to Toronto, mostly just to start something. And I felt like Toronto had a better ecosystem than where I was from in Vancouver. But I really didn't know what I wanted to do, and it happened organically. I had been hit by a taxi before when I left Vancouver, and they sent me all of $5,000 to as a settlement. So I said, "Okay, great. I'm gonna start a business with $5,000 because that's as much money as you need to start a business.
Really?
I could run with this." I was at a company called well.ca, and I left there. They had basically split into 2 companies. When I had joined there, they had split into 2 companies. There was a tech and innovation side, and there was a marketing and e-commerce side. And I really the tech and innovation side of the company that developed all their proprietary software and everything was very interesting to me. But they said, "You're a marketer. You should go sell shampoo on the website." And I didn't want to do that per se. I wanted to work on the sort of more creative side. And so I ended up leaving and starting Patio at the time with one of the UX designers from CA. So we started the company, and it was really just designing digital experiences. I was a marketing and strategy guy. He was a UX guy. We ended up taking on two more partners, short lived. To one was a front end developer, one was a back end developer, and then we ended up taking on a graphic designer. So there was actually five of us right at the beginning of Patio. The reality of starting a small business like that is you have a lot of hope and a lot of dreams, and you just say, yeah, let's start a business and we'll design digital stuff. And that's where we were at. And then it just, you realize you need like a little more structure and direction and all that stuff. And my partners all dropped out like flies. And I was left by myself running what was Patio Interactive and trying to figure out what to do with it. And that was how it started. What was
Mhm.
your question again?
I was just getting you to introduce yourself. Done a great job. We're right into the nitty gritty, which
Okay.
I love. How so you like I said, you started it, you had a little bit of cash, a lot of enthusiasm, a few partners that did not stick around. I know getting Patio off the ground was a wild ride. And then in the 6 years from founding to selling, there were a lot of pivots. So I'm wondering if maybe you can talk about how Patio became an XR for business company and maybe actually just start by explaining what XR for business, extended reality, means for those listening.
Sure. Yeah. No. So I guess that was really the challenge for us as a service-based company, designing digital experiences, not really sure. We had done some stuff on web, and I was had won some sort of award at when we were at Well for this building this app that could scan things and then add products to the app to buy, different sorts of CPG good. But we really didn't know what sort of brand or angle the company was going to take. I had won a or I had come to third place in a startup weekend, which is like a case competition for aspiring entrepreneurs. They enter on Friday, you get a concept, and then you have to pitch a business idea on the Sunday. We had come in third place, and I got free office space at a co-working space, which is now a Dollarama, called MakeWorks. And so I just went there and I said, I'm starting my business and I have a free office and it's better than my basement apartment. And there was another company in there called Make Lab, and they did 3D printing, and they had a couple interns that were smart guys, and they were still in university, and they were really techie, and I made friends with them, and we ordered a 3D printer from China. This was earlier on, when just after the IP for 3D printing was made public, and 3D printing became a big sort of a boom, and we built our own shitty 3D printer in the space. And so we were still just doing like web related stuff. We are building websites, building smaller. We did a learning game for TD for our mutual friend Dave. But it was still like, as an identity of a company, we didn't really know. And you're in Toronto, you can throw a rock and hit 19 digital design and development companies. We'll build your website. There's a million of those. So it also just didn't really get me going. A friend of a friend came to our co-working space and saw the 3D printer, and he thought it was just the coolest thing he'd ever seen. And he said, "This is a 3D printer." I said, "Yeah." I said, "This is really cool. We're talking about this at work." I'm like, "Oh, that's just a piece of crap that we built ourselves. It could make Yodas about this big." And that was pretty much it. And always failed at the ears because of just how 3D printing works. So it made really sad looking Yoda.
Yoda.
Sad Yoda.
The sad Yoda.
And exactly, that's all it did. And he said, "I work for PwC, PricewaterhouseCoopers, the large financial services auditing Big Four company." I know you're familiar with those types of companies. And he said, I work for the innovation team at PwC, and we have 8 disruptors that we are looking at to help our clients understand how this could change their businesses, change their financials. Obviously, it was very bottom line, top line, balance sheet focused because they are an accounting company. So they had the 8 disruptors: virtual reality, augmented reality, 3D printing, blockchain, big data, green tech, drones, and I can never remember the last one. But that was what they were really interested in. But of course, they were an accounting company and they didn't know much about it. And he said, "Do you want to come in and just meet with the innovation team and talk about the stuff that you're doing?" And I said, "Okay, sure. I barely know more than you, but yeah, we got a 3D printer."
Sometimes that's all you
So we
need.
came in. Yes,
Step love a 3D printer. I
yeah.
go to 3D printer, but to be just 1 or 2 ahead of people to be valuable.
Yeah, it's just high school teachers. They don't have to know everything. They just have to be like one chapter ahead of their students. Went in and we said, "Oh yeah, we design with new technology. We're really at the cutting edge of this, and we're trying to design and understand how user experiences can change with technology like 3D printers." And we had played a little bit with virtual reality too. One of the interns from Make Lab, Lennar, he was one of the Kickstarters for the original Oculus Rift, and so we played with that. So I was a little familiar with that. And they said, "That's great because we want to show our clients that we understand this technology and how it can affect their businesses." And I said, "I'd love to work with you guys." So we ended up landing a retainer with PwC to work with them on a number of different projects. And that just spiraled. And so we went from just a run of the mill digital design and like light development company to a company that specialized in designing experiences with disruptive technology and somewhat consultative in understanding how disruptive technology can affect businesses, which was basically what PwC was doing, and we just crafted that company out of that idea. But it was PwC, and so they had like real clients like Loblaws and Metrolinx and Shoppers Drug Mart, which as a small team of at that time we were three could never even dream of landing. So it really set us on that path.
So, can you maybe explain a little bit extended reality for business and why that was like an innovative space to be working in and just
So
like what that means so people can get a sense of what you're talking about?
sorry, you just cut out of the first part there.
Oh, can you just explain a little bit what extended reality is and how applying
Oh,
it to
yeah,
business like an innovative space to be in?
sure. So extended reality it's a catch-all term for anything but real reality. So virtual reality, which would be like a Oculus Rift, Oculus Quest at VR headset. It's fully immersive. Then there's augmented reality, which is overlaying data and information onto real reality. And then there's mixed reality, and there's basically taking if real reality bores you, there's extended reality, which covers pretty much everything else. We did things like projection mapping in experiences, interactive projection mapping. If you've ever seen projection mapping on a building, that would be a type of extended reality as well too. And we evolved. It was really a growing technology while Patio was growing, and we learned how it could be applied to different things. So extended reality, XR is the term we use, but then when Apple came out with their XR phone, it screwed up our SEO big time. But that's still a term at least in the industry that we use.
Awesome. I love that we're doing all of the things and then you landed the right client and that kind of defined the company's vision and mission so much more. I think it actually reminds me of we had last season Kirsten and she said you can't go wrong if it's in the voice of the customer and like really like about listening to your customers and building with them. And it sounds like that's really what you did with PwC and really created that platform. And I think that's so exciting, especially when you're in a more innovative space. I love that. Listening to the
Yeah,
market,
I think
especially
you're absolutely right.
no, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. There's a bit of a lag, but yeah, you're absolutely right. It just so happened that we were really passionate about this cool nerdy tech. And then a customer said, "Oh, we're trying to solve problems with this cool nerdy tech." So I think it is very much they were our customer. We didn't even know they were our customer. We didn't even know this was a business that was viable. But it was as soon as they said that, we really jumped and ran with it. And they were our biggest client for a number of years.
Yeah, I remember even my time with you, they were, and I think it speaks to something, especially in like service and even product. They always say like the most successful entrepreneurs fall in love with a problem and then solve for it, as opposed to building a product and trying to find a problem for it. And I think that's like really a great way to build companies where you almost build with your customers. You go out and you're like, this is such an issue. Let me like find someone who really needs help and I'm going to help them. And then once I've found and crafted that first iteration, how can I then standardize this as a service or productize it into a product and really build and grow that way? And that also allows you to pave the way with paid work, right? Because Patio was bootstrapped. We never took on external investment. Obviously, you put a lot in to get it through some of the growing pains, but quite unusual for a company that makes it to the 6-year mark or that makes it to even like an exit.
Hmm. Yeah, that $5,000 went a long way.
Thank God for tax.
Right. Yeah.
So
No, you're right. Sorry. It is very much back and forth in terms of validation. We accidentally validated this need just by having a 3D printer in the space and then having somebody there. It wasn't like we were going out to validate that, but then we just listened
mm.
and crafted our brand and our positioning because of that. So it was a validation back and forth.
And I think it's a great example of follow your passion and be open. And when the serendipitous things happen, like you'll see them, you'll recognize them, right? Because by following the passion, by thinking about the things or having something that you're working on in the space, even if it is just a Stat Yoda 3D printer, you're showcasing what you're interested in and it creates those places for people to hook in, right? If you never
Mhm.
you actually want to be doing, if you don't talk about it, then people are not necessarily out there talking about it either. And it's two closed doors right across the hall from each other that just like never open and showcase that actually they should be connecting through that hallway to create something bigger.
Definitely.
XR, you talked about it a little bit. You're basically gaming level tech being applied into business forums. And it's a tech that was evolving very quickly and still is to this day with, I think, a lot of unknowns, a lot of excitement, but not necessarily like comprehension. So, what are some of the challenges and opportunities of working with a nascent technology like extended reality?
Yeah. What we learned with PwC and with just in general, when I first tried virtual reality, it was like a Jurassic Park style thing, and you were in a nest in a pterodactyl's nest and then there was a giant T-Rex walking by. But it's fully immersive, and your mind just you're sitting there in an office and you're playing this, and your mind is saying, "No, there's a T-Rex about to bite your head off." And no matter how much you say, "No, it's fine. It's just I'm just watching a screen." It's so immersive that part of you thinks that you're about to die. And in fact, with that same experience, we had somebody at a demo at Facebook run straight into a TV, and that's when we remembered we had to sign waivers. So what we were as we were playing with the tech, we were very much interested in the utility behind. I'm thinking, okay, this is very cool, but how can this actually solve business challenges? And I think a company like PwC or whoever, they like that too. But there was a second side to extended reality, which was it was just cool as shit.
Yeah.
So there was the, for lack of a better term, and I've already sworn twice on your podcast. I
Oh,
apologize.
it rated for adult. It's fine.
Okay, cool. It was fluffy. So it was such a cool experience. And PwC and a bunch of other clients saw it. They're like, we love this stuff. It's just fun. We want to show everybody how much fun this is. And we said, yeah, it is fun. We can actually solve business challenges too. And they're like, yeah, we want to do that too. But for now, can you just come and host this we're going to have an office party and we want people to do VR painting. As we're growing, we're like, yeah, I love for sure. If the check clears. So I think that was a blessing and a curse because there was such an amazing novelty to extended reality that as a company, I really feel in all technology, I think this is very important, especially when you think of things like crypto and NFTs and whatnot, is like, where is the actual utility coming from this? And with extended reality, there are so many great use cases for how you can use this from a utilitarian perspective. It's also super cool. It's so much fun, but the psychology behind why it's so much fun also helps with things that can better humanity or treat people in palliative care or train people to learn new skills or so many different things or connect people in different ways. I think the challenge really was us as a company not just being a front end experiential marketing company that would do cool things. We did bar mitzvahs. They
Right.
were so expensive bar mitzvahs and it was a lot of fun, but that was just people wanting to play with VR. We did VR and then the bar mitzvah and then Cardinal Official performed and the kid was 13, carried him out. It's like, you peak at 13 if that's your bar mitzvah, but
Wow.
that's a different story.
Different episode. I know one of my takeaways from coming in when I partnered in patio with you and we were working on really growing that bigger side, the bigger projects, the innovative use cases, was that, like you said, there's a lot of attraction and interest because it's neat and interesting and sexy. And there's a huge gap between that and the comprehension of the utility. And it can be really tough to educate. And it's a nascent technology. So everything is being done for the first time. So it's expensive because you have to be building and you're almost building the plane as you're flying it a lot of the time. And so I remember one of our challenges that we worked through in some workshops was like, what's our cost of acquisition, right? What is the funnel for clients come in? Because we get people come in and they love it and they want PwC. They want you to come in and talk to their team and they want to learn about it and it's fun and flashy, but they don't actually know how they want to use it. And the real stuff, especially that like you were really passionate about like game-changing business use cases, a lot of people weren't ready to pay for it. And so there was a
Mhm.
lot asking us to come in and present and educate, and the number of conversations and calls and a lot of free workshops became really challenging when you put it beside the growth that we wanted to see within the company. And so what it meant was like we had to start looking at the industries and the profiles of the industries and the leaders that we wanted to target in order to move that needle and, have people who were a little more maybe open to risk, open to new tech, could either grasp the idea or were willing to experiment with their funds. Is that fair?
Yeah, no, that's totally fair.
Yeah.
I think we found sort of 2 price points, and the 3rd price point, which was what you said was like a price point of 0, which is come and educate us on extended reality. Sure, we'd love to if hopefully this leads to business and really, you know, I guess framing it would have been so nice to just be paid as like an XR consultant who would we can come in and educate you and you'll find value from this. But you should pay us for this. It's our time and it's our knowledge. A lot of times, a lot of businesses who are on the cusp of this, they are hesitant to pay for that. So they need something more concrete to pay for, and it's usually like a more clear outcome. And so that was a big challenge for us. And then the next price point was something fun for our event. Our innovation team or our marketing event wants to showcase this. So it was usually oftentimes like off the shelf products, and we would set it up. We would set up the VR and then wherever they had it. And that was 4 or 5 figures at most because we weren't developing something. And they say, we love this. We can see these applications. Tell us, like, how can we use this to train our team? And I said, yeah, we can absolutely design that. That's going to be 100 grand plus. And then suddenly they're like, ooh, a lot of money. I don't know if we can find the ROI in that. We thought it'd be 5 or 10 grand. So no, we got to develop custom software and experiences for you. We can,
We're
and then
building a
as a
world.
smaller team too. Yeah, exactly. And as a smaller team too, we didn't necessarily we weren't able to properly communicate the ROI, especially with something so nascent. It's like there is ROI out there, but nobody necessarily wants to be the first. And so we believed in it. We knew it was there, but it was very tough to get a company to commit to a 100K plus project that's custom for them, knowing that their jobs are on the line. They have stakeholders and they want to make sure this isn't just taking a chance. So yeah, it was a tough jump from cool, experiential to let's build something product that can really help your company.
Yeah, I know. I think we faced what a lot of companies face, which was getting people to pay for the strategy, right? Getting people,
Yeah.
because we were doing something that wasn't easy to be like, I want this that's already been done and is really clearly established business case. There's a
Yeah.
lot of strategy and innovation up front and getting people to pay for that. And we made a lot of inroads there. And I think it was, we had a lot of crazy experiences in patio, but it is one of the ways that we moved really heavily into the cannabis space. And you made a lot of inroads there. That was around the time that I started being on the board and then eventually joining into patio because cannabis was ready to be more innovative. There was a lot of money at the time, short-lived, but I'm curious what stands out from that time. Is there a story that would highlight kind of what that experience.
Yeah. So I guess that was the thing. So we were going after these industries that were a little more established and a little more conservative. They run businesses and they're nervous about taking on bigger projects that are 6 and 7 figures unless they really know. And since it was like prove us that it's been done, prove to us that this can work, and so it's never been done before, but we can shuffle it on. It was just a lot of back and forth, a lot of challenges there. And then the cannabis industry happens. They legalize cannabis. There's a huge influx of money. It's a perfect storm for people who want to innovate and maybe don't want are struggling to believe in what they do, but are struggling to convince stakeholders with money to spend it. There was cowboys and finance guys who were running it, and stock market was crazy, and all these publicly funded companies were raising hundreds of millions of dollars, and they didn't know where to spend it, and they were all looking for ways to differentiate themselves. And it just turns out a client of ours from actually from the alcohol industry had moved, and we had done a VR tour of a facility in the alcohol space to a smaller kind of project, and then he had moved to a cannabis company, and he said, "You know what you did for us at at Mill Street?" I can say name. "You know what you did for us at Mill Street? We wanna do this again at CanTrust." And I said, "Fantastic, we'd love to." And we went in there, we pitched them the idea. We also increased our prices because it was oftentimes we were doing things cheaper than we should have just to win the project. But that we knew that wasn't super sustainable if you wanted to grow, so we increased our prices that much. But as you advised, you're not charging enough. And so we got into the cannabis space, and we were a company where we're like I said, we believed in the power of extended reality to solve business challenges. And here's an industry that's just started. They have a lot of business challenges. They have a lot of different unique regulations around how you market cannabis, how you communicate with investors, how you train people, how you educate people. So this was perfect for the XR space. So CanTrust hired us. We did virtual reality of their facility, which was in the middle of nowhere. And they wanted to raise money to basically show investors what their facility looked like. It was a very cool state-of-the-art facility. And then we ended up doing a bunch of other stuff in the cannabis industry too. We established ourselves as one of the preeminent extended reality design and development companies for the cannabis industry, which sounds niche, but at the time there was so much money in cannabis that we were very busy and we were able to grow our relationships. One cannabis company saw what we were doing with CanTrust. They called us. We built our network out. We really dug into that industry. And it was great because they had a lot of money. There was way less barriers to sign off. We would pitch them the concept. Yeah, yes. Fast and loose, lots of money. It's every sort of tech innovator's dream. As a designer, you just wanna be able to do things without having to worry about nickel and diming and see the possibilities. So we did augmented reality bud tenders that you would scan a product and a bud tender would pop up and talk to you, and we built 3D models of the buds, and we built sales tools for the salespeople and also education tools for doctors to really understand because it's so new. We were talking about terpenes. I learned so much about cannabis, the science behind it. Uh, it became a real business. And so we really blew up and we're able to do a lot of really interesting, forward-thinking, somewhat experimental things, but we were able to get a lot of really good results. I remember the head of marketing for Cantros calling me and saying, "This was the best investment we ever made. You did the VR of our facility. We took the VR headset to investor relations meetings. We were able to raise $200 million and it was a hit of every investment meeting because these investors who had a lot of money didn't want to go to the middle of nowhere to inspect the facility, but they could see it all in the headset. And
Or another
they saw it.
point.
Yes. Oh, not another PowerPoint. And so they loved it and they said they got their checkbooks out afterwards. So there was a great case of measurable ROI from the work that we did. And that felt so good to me, just believing in the power of the technology and then being able to do something that was fairly measurable. And hey, yeah, look, we won hearts and minds. We pitched this idea. It worked. And that made a difference.
Yeah, and I think cannabis was I highlighted it as this Wild West opportunity that was in a bit of a gold rush, but it was a really interesting industry because it had a lot of challenges and it had a lot of unknowns as well. So there was evolving regulation. This is a stigmatized product, but also a heavily regulated product. And it's also perishable. So nobody really understands it. Nobody really understands legal recreational industry on a industrial scale. So you're going all over the world trying to explain pharma grade production and that this is science and this isn't a grow up that in someone's backyard. And then you're also trying to take a product around and tell people and educate, but it's perishable. So like it doesn't travel well and it's right. And it's a controlled substance. So you can't just hand out samples and be like the way you would with so many other products, honestly, including pharma. It's crazy. We were in this place where there was a lot of excitement, but there was a lot of obstacles. And so the technology that we were using that you and the team had been honing and learning about for years was just so well positioned to help people experience something that was very restricted. So it was like a really interesting, like heart synchronous or serendipitous kind of meeting. One of the of patio was thrive in disruption. So I love that term. It related, I think, both to how we wanted to operate and also what we wanted to deliver for our clients. And it's a concept that comes from the book Anti-Fragile. If anyone's listening to this, Anti-Fragile, Things That Gain from Disorder by Nassim Nicholas Taleb. Interesting book, heavy book. Make sure you're like in the right headspace to listen to it. Why did you love this concept so much? Because you were really enamored with this when we started collaborating on Patio. And how do you think that we brought it to life?
Yeah. So I had read the book. I love the concept that the opposite of fragile is not strong, because fragile means that if there's unforeseen circumstances.
Might have lost you for a moment. Let's just give Charles a minute. I think we lost him, unless it's me. No, looks like it's Charles. Ring. Quick moment here. Bear with us if you're listening. All right. The joy of lives. And
No, it was just getting good too.
I know, we're just rolling.
This video calls completely conked out on me.
Okay.
Sorry about that. Well,
Habit,
anti-fragility.
anti-fragile. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I love the concept. I loved the idea of basically being nimble enough to capitalize on unforeseen or randomized ex- inputs. When I built the company, I thought about how we could be nimble. As a startup, you want to be nimble anyways. And I think it came from the idea that when I first started Patio, I really didn't know what we wanted to be. So I did know that as we grew, I would find what really made sense. And then I'd be like, okay, if we find what makes sense, we better be able to jump on this. The PwC meeting, we jumped on it. We evolved the company. It did make sense. We had our own criteria about what was important to us. I loved that side of things. It wasn't like I was selling my soul. I was just matching what I wanted to do with what the market was demanding with disruptive technology. And cannabis came along, it was the same thing. So we really were able to capitalize on that. And I think anti-fragility from a leadership perspective touches on a number of different levels. It touches on who you hire, why you hire them, why are they at your company, what do they love doing, communication to your staff. Because as well too, chasing shiny objects, which I know this is the other side that you have pointed out, because it's not that you don't want to just be like, oh, that's cool, we should jump into that. You need to be grounded in some respect, but with communicating with your team that a level of transparency. One of the things that was when we grew Patio was I was very transparent to my team about my thought process. And I was also open to having a meritocracy of ideas and a sounding board, because the one thing you realize as a leader is that you don't know everything. And the day you think everything is probably the day that you're going to do something really dumb. It was really important that I surrounded myself with people who would disagree with me all the time or had a different view. I make my decisions based on hope, and a lot of people make their decisions based on fear, and both are equally valid. So when you
Right.
have a meeting, you need to think about what could go right and also what could go wrong. And then hopefully you meet in the middle and everybody is satisfied with the directions. You're getting into cannabis. It's a very interesting space. There's still a stigma around this. Do we want to market this? Can we market this? Do we want to tell people? Do we want to tell PwC, who's very traditional, oh, we also do a ton of work in the cannabis space? This is a concern. I think there's a lot to think about when you think about anti-fragility and a company and how you can grow there. And it's still fascinating. I'm still learning about how it can be done in different ways. And I think ultimately, actually, one of the things we learned as well, back to CanTrust, because I think some of your viewers will know the story there. They became one of our biggest clients. They absolutely love the stuff they've done. We had helped them raise several $100 million for investors with the work that we did. And then one day I'm meeting with another client and he had a TV on in the background. And on it was like the news channel, the business news channel, and it said, CanTrust facilities rated by the
Yeah.
FDA. I think it was the FDA. And I was just watching it. I was trying to pay attention to the client. It's bad enough that there's a TV in the background because
Yeah.
easily.
I
And
remember
then I had
that we were in.
CanTrust rated. I was like, oh no, this isn't good. Because I think one of the tenets of anti-fragility is don't put all your eggs in one basket, because that can come back to haunt you. And apparently they had unlicensed grow rooms and they got in big trouble
Allegedly,
from
trouble on this.
yeah.
Yeah. No.
And that
Yeah.
was really bad. It's all in the news now. And basically I knew that meant big ramifications because they were one of our core clients. And as a small company, you rely on there's like the smaller companies that you do innovative stuff with, but then there's a few bigger companies that you have established relationships with. You continuously do work with them.
Yeah.
And we had
They
a
were
number of
some of
ongoing
our
projects.
Yeah, they were
Yeah.
one of our recurring revenue clients.
Yeah.
Rely on them for our ongoing operations to fund some of the more fun and see things.
So
So
that was not good. And sure enough, a few days later, I had a call from my point of contact from the head of marketing at CanTrust, and he said, "Hey, I guess you've seen the news." I say, "Yeah. So what does this mean for our projects moving forward and our accounts receivable?" And he said, "We're going to pay you for all the work you've done so far, but we need to cancel all of our projects right now because we are going into a different mode of the company. And unfortunately, that means we have to cancel all of our projects moving forward." And as a company, as a small company that we had our pipeline and were fairly confident that it was gonna stay that way, and then to have suddenly close to 7 figures just pulled out from under us, it hurts your trajectory, and 100% this is the opposite of what I've been preaching in terms of anti-fragile, because didn't see that coming and certainly didn't pivot in a way to benefit from.
I will say devil's advocate, there had been a lot of expansion happening. The challenge was a lot of it was into cannabis and equally unstable companies. So there, I remember that time pretty well. It felt like when you're learning to surf and you're trying to get out to actually surf the wave and you just keep getting hit by a wave, you can't actually get out, you catch it. Like that was that 4-month stretch for us where it was just like the hits keep coming. So I want to we could talk about that in itself, but I want to make sure we get a little bit into the leadership side, the team, the culture, and then ultimately the acquisition, because that was actually part of the starting of maybe we actually want to do something different or do something in a different way. Obviously, we could probably do a whole episode on the acquisition and the pandemic and the pivots. And I want to maybe highlight it and we'll see if we come back to it that the pivots that we did to survive that there was also massive pivots when pandemic hit, where not only had we been planning an acquisition that fell through, but suddenly people weren't gathering, putting a VR headset on your face was an absolute fuck no for 99% of people. So there's a lot of stories of the pivot. And so while you say the opposite of anti-fragile, I do think that Patio really was an incredible example of the ability to roll with the difficulty and jump on the opportunity throughout our time. We may have had shorter waves of that made it hard to build some momentum in certain instances, but I do think that it was a really great example. So
Yeah.
you're thinking about all of this, and I want to talk about you a little bit. I always like to say that growing a business, leading a team, it brings up our shit. Like whether we realize it or not, whether we want to face it or not, it does. And it's why I work with founders on their leadership development alongside the strategic growth of the company. Because you start a company and it starts to take off and it becomes bigger and you don't become self-aware, it's a recipe for disaster. What would you say was the most challenging part of growing a company for you as a leader?
Yeah. So I had done other entrepreneurial things. My first venture into being an entrepreneur was actually a speed dating company in Vancouver, but it was 3 of us. We had limited growth. This was pre online dating, pre Tinder and Hinge and whatnot. It was a singles and social event, which is another podcast possibly. But I think you, as an entrepreneur, you think like you have your passions, you have your idea, and you can drive it forward in a certain way, but not, I think the realities of leadership, it's there's only so much you can learn in a David Lank class in McGill, the MBA program, without being thrust into it and really learning trial by fire and being a leader and having a team that depends on you, that wants your leadership, that wants your direction in certain ways, and then also just understanding why you get up in the morning and what you're good at and what you're not good at, and what you need to do to make the company survive. It's every day is a test in humility, and you could get some successes and think everything, and that's not always the case. And I learned, and it's ultimately why I brought you on as well too, was in our ongoing chats, there was a lot of things that I either didn't know about or I did, but I really hated doing them. So I pushed them off, but it was like the medicine for the company. It was
Mm.
things that we had to get our shit together in certain ways in order to grow. There's things that I was good at, and there was things that I was really bad at, and I probably needed to fill those gaps if the company was going to grow. And this isn't, it could be seen as an ego thing. You could read the E-Myth or Rocket Fuel or all those books about the founder archetypes and seeing that there are different archetypes for different kind of skills and that they need to complement each other. And most likely a founder, a leader of a company is not going to be all those things. That's why they have CFOs and they have COOs and they have CEOs and or whatever. And so there was a lot of things in terms of structuring the company that I wasn't super good at. I was much more of a pie in the sky kind of visionary idea kind of guy, which could get clients excited. I did a lot of the business development. I did a lot of that sort of quasi marketing innovation side, but you still need operations. You still need to look at the bottom lines. You need to forecast. You need structure. You need goal setting. You need all that stuff. And I was like, that's not my favorite thing to do. And then you came along and I slowly sucked you in to helping me do all that stuff.
Or be innovative, sell the thing. I'm going to sit here in the dark and do the thing for the team. They know
Make sure the spreadsheets look nice. And I think that's key. But there is that, I think as a leader, you think you might think everything. And also you definitely want to be welcoming to people saying, I disagree with you. I'm concerned about this. You should recognize this. It's important to this company. And here's why. And let's have a conversation about this. And then really learning to trust those people who really believe in it from a different lens.
Yeah. When I know for you, culture and diversity, like of the team and the ideas was a huge one. And it was one of the things I loved about Patty. It was one of the things that made it really easy to take that final step and join because there was, even though you and I are so different in how we operate, right? The value alignment was like really there. And I think that was like really important and really strong. And then the fact that we were different, even though we may have wanted to murder each other on several occasions. I often think it's a miracle we've emerged with such a great friendship after working together for so long, was that you're out there having wild ideas and being the yes guy and selling the idea and the vision, and then having the opposite side, which is me, who's looking at, okay, how do we actually make that work? What's the trade-off? Does this align? Can we make smart choices to make it work without risking all the marbles? And so I think that culture that you just talked about is really unique and was what really allowed you as that visionary energy to still be really connected and like not overly hierarchical with the team. And I think that was one of the strengths that our culture, and we were told this many times by team members, was what often attracted and retained talent, even in times when we couldn't compete on market rates. So I'm wondering, and maybe it's what you've already covered, but what would you say was the core, the key attributes of that culture and what made it so successful?
Yeah, and getting into it, I never really thought much about the psychology, of our of the team, but as we grew, I realized how important it was on all levels, not just from optics, but also just why do people come and work at a company when they had the great resignation? I don't know if that's still going on, but people work is such an important part of your day. It's like what we do for so much of it. And so as an employer, you got to think, especially as a smaller company, because we couldn't afford to, pay top dollar for talent. We got some amazing talent. And the reason they were there was because we were checking other boxes because people don't necessarily just do things for the money. Obviously, every now and then Shopify would come by and they'd poach one of our developers for an insane amount of money. And that, of course, is a big checkbox and where I would say, yeah, I think you should probably take that offer because that's pretty awesome. That sounds like an opportunity. But I think really thinking about why people come and work at a company, and people don't necessarily leave because of the money. That's one aspect of it. They leave because of a lot of things. And if it's really fulfilling on a daily basis, and that really does stem from the leadership at the top. The fish rots from the head. And if, especially as knowing my role in the company as much more of a cheerleader in a lot of ways and getting people excited and engaging people and listening to them and making them feel like they're really part of this team and then giving them opportunities to follow their passions, I think was such an important part to our retention. We didn't have many Glassdoor reviews, but we were all 5 stars. And I think that's surprising. If you want to think it, you want to see what a company's read those Glassdoor reviews, read between the lines because there's a lot of different reasons why people could leave a crappy Glassdoor review. But that being said, I think it's very telling about how
Mhm.
a company is operating. And when you can't just pay top dollar for people, as a leader, you have to really be aware of how and why people are coming to work for you and what is important to them. So you're playing as much a psychologist as you are a business person.
Yeah. I think even if you are paying top dollar, it might get people
Oh
in the
yeah.
door, but it won't keep them, especially these days. People
Yeah.
need they need so many different components to feel fulfilled and included and all the things. And I think the reality is even if you can pay top dollar, so can a lot of other companies. So someone can
Mhm.
easily come along and offer a little more. And if that's your main point, like forget about it. Forget about
Yeah.
the retention,
Yeah.
forget about the value that comes with longevity and people growing with your company. Just don't count on that. You need a
Retention.
strategy.
Yeah. Cost of retention or losing an employee, especially in a company like ours, which is small. If we had 10 people and somebody quits, you basically have lost 10% of your workforce with 2 weeks notice. And so, and even at larger companies, especially with key roles, if people are just leaving because they get offered the same opportunity, but 10 grand more a year, that cost to the company, they've measured it a few times and it's hard to quantify, but it's a lot.
It's a
It's a
lot.
lot more than you.
There's other metric. There's lots of metrics of 6 months till someone's fully operational. There's metrics of between 40 and 80% of salary is the cost of onboarding or of retention or turnover. There's so many different ways, but like all of them is if you have good employees, figure out how to keep them, figure out how to grow them. If you don't have good
Right.
employees, that's a whole other conversation because growth company, you do have changing needs and different profiles, but that's another episode. I want to be mindful of time, but I do think that we cannot have this conversation without talking about the acquisition because it's every founder's dream to sell their company. There's so much money. What brought you slash us to the point of acquisition?
It was a number of things, and I guess being in the tech world, first thing is that I wanted to use the design and the services side to be a springboard to develop scalable products. We had looked into building some. We had a lot of momentum in the cannabis space for some scalable products. The CannTrust thing was a kick in the stomach, but the I think the challenge was really for us is balancing the services and actually committing enough resources and time and energy to scalable products. And it was quite the roller coaster. I guess I eventually came to the conclusion that as a service-based company, we had plateaued where we were doing the same stuff and we were growing, but it was heavy on people. It wasn't super scalable. And a lot of it was not evolving the same way we had the same momentum as we had earlier in the company's growth. So it's came to a point where I'm like, can I get access to bigger, more interesting opportunities or change something in the company in a way that we can make it more interesting? The company, you said before, was an extension of my childhood with the kind of wacky stuff we did. But then it got to the point where we weren't actually didn't feel that wacky anymore. It didn't feel fresh. And then you start thinking about what can you do? And we ended up thinking about how to position the company. Why would you be acquired? What would a potential acquisition look like? What would they be acquiring? Was it IP? Is it people? Is it clients? Is it processes? I think when you have a company and you're thinking about an exit, these are the things that you should really go down the list. And also, what you think you're being acquired for is not necessarily what the acquirer is valuing. And then it's about that conversation of we also have this. Is this a value to you? Sometimes you can convince them, and sometimes you can't. So I think for us, it was a really wanting a change to open up different opportunities and do something that I love to do in a different way, more than it was about like a successful exit. Ultimately, uh, service-based company, right? So we're not that scalable. So there was value, at least we thought there was
Yeah,
value, right?
I remember
But
the
it's not Trump.
conversations. I think what we ended up fault landing on was what we need to go where we want is not necessarily accessible without taking on a round of investment. So we could either look at a round of investment in a not super scalable service-based company where multiples aren't great. So you probably have to give up a lot. Or we could look at ways to become part of a bigger ecosystem. And one of those was through acquisition. And so we just started having those conversations. But I think what you were getting into is really interesting. What are some of the biggest lessons you learned from going through that process? Or maybe just what do you wish you'd known before going into the acquisition process?
A lot of lessons. You don't really do that every day. And so it is, again, another sort of trial by fire. I, we had a culture of transparency with the team. And if we were going to get acquired, if you work for a company and the CEO is actively looking to get an acquisition, that sits in your head. And if you have a culture of transparency, then you have to own that. You got to have conversations with your team about what you're doing, why you're doing it, and see where that goes. I think it made some people uneasy. They were worried about the culture. They were worried about their futures. They loved we were a boutique team. We were up to 13 people, and they were wondering about how that would change during an acquisition. So there was a lot of conversations, a lot of like hearts and minds talking to them about how this could change. And plus also too, it's like acquisitions take a lot longer. I think in our case, it took a lot longer than it probably should have, but also just what I've learned as well too is that it's like getting construction done on your home. Like you always expect a timeline and then it's, oh no, there's one reason or another that's going to take way longer. So of course you tell that to your team, you say, hey, like we're working on this acquisition or like we found somebody who is interested, we're going through due diligence. But then it's, oh, they expect the acquisition in a month. And then it turns out it takes 6 months. And then it's like the staff are like, why are you playing with our emotions like this? Because, our acquisition would be a big deal. And it was a big deal to us as well, too. We were then taking time away from running the business to do the acquisition. So you only have so many hours a day. And I know you spent so much time both doing, again, like the hard operational stuff to make sure that we stayed viable, plus a lot of heavy lifting on the acquisition side. And even though we hired a deal team, they were still coming in from outside. They still needed a lot of our time and input and our thinking and our strategy to be able to do that. So things had to give and things suffered. Culture suffered, it was stressful. We had second guesses about whether it was the right move. It's a big deal. You sell something that you've spent 7 years of your life building. Is this the right move?
I think you articulated that like so well around the trade-offs. I also want to just, for those listening, our acquisition was set against the backdrop of the pandemic. So we had a deal lined up in March 2020. It fell through. We then went through our own 2 months of not being sure if we were going to make it. This was right after the CanTrust stuff and some of the other cannabis issues. Then we had a bunch of clients drop off. The whole market changed. We pivoted. But we then proceeded to do 10 months of hardcore growth. We tripled in size in 10 months. And about 6 of those months were spent going through another acquisition process. So your point about like running the company was while trying to do a deal, while hiring people in and trying to make some decisions, but not game-changing decisions because we were already in a letter of intent, a deal. Like there were so many moving pieces and so many kind of limitations and opportunities. And as you said, both of us trying to put the time and energy needed to close the deal, but also run the company and not let the opportunity slip because we were growing and it was really important to continue that trajectory. And new people and established people and this really cool culture that suddenly felt like it was at risk for a lot of our team members. Yeah.
Yeah. I've heard of companies that come close to being acquired, then the acquisition falls through and the company just never recovers. That happens. So, especially we were a service-based company with not a large runway. Clients and we had grown a lot, but growth comes with the challenges of more mouths to feed. And ultimately, we were acquired by our biggest customer, who it also makes you nervous because they're your biggest customer. But if they decided to decide one day they didn't want to be your biggest customer, yeah, you're in a very awkward position. It's bad enough when CanTrust gets raided by the feds, but it's a leverage and power when it comes to that client customer relationship.
Yeah, it was this double-edged sword because they became our biggest customer during this process. So we were like really building and growing and focusing very much on them and worrying that we were putting a lot of eggs in one basket, but with a really specific and like short-term outcome. Um, but yeah, like and we just the reality was in leadership, it was just you and I, right? So we only had so much bandwidth and we had to make decisions and we bet and it paid off. But yeah, that was it was like quite a process. And I think if anyone is looking to go through that, talk to people who've been through it, look for resources online. There's so many good ones. I know I shared one from one of our peers recently who hopefully is going to come on the podcast in a few weeks, which was like a high level due diligence checklist. Like just it's a huge amount of work and it's a whole nother job. And we did have some support, but we also were on a shoestring budget. A lot of the work did fall on us as the leaders at the time. All right, Charlie, I cannot thank you enough for this. I have a couple fun wrap up questions just so people get to know you. And then we'll let people know where they can reach you and like what you're working on next. So what is an experience that changed your life? And you can definitely pass on one or two of these if you're not sure, but what's an experience that changed your life?
Oh, I mean, a single experience or running patio was,
Running patio.
yeah, to have a company that grows like that. I went to school, I got a master's degree, and nothing really prepares you for actually running a business. And uh, it's so stimulating and challenging, but it's terrifying. And there's so many metaphors about running a business is like walking through a dark alley, and you might meet Mike Tyson, and you might meet somebody who's going to give you an ice cream or whatever that. It, yeah, it was. There was never a dull moment. Very rare. It was so stimulating and such a unique experience. So that's a cop out answer of that whole, but it's something running your own business versus just being a cog in a bigger wheel is very unique and humbling and challenging and insightful, but it's ultimately very stimulating. So it would be, and it's hard. It's like a drug. You don't necessarily just want to, because you think about what's important to you. And then you want to get up in the morning. And sometimes like you get up in the morning because if you don't, everybody is in deep trouble, but that's still a motivating. I only exert effort when somebody's trying to murder me, which is an interesting exercise in psychology. So,
Yeah, absolutely. What's the best question you've been asked?
yeah, I guess the question I get asked a lot is like, "What's next for you?" And I honestly, I'm still like, you have a lot of momentum in something, and you're still figuring out, okay, had the exit, handcuffs ended, left the company. I just did what I wanted to do from when I was 8 years old. And now I'm like, okay, I should have probably thought about a longer, like when I was 8, to think that 30 years later, like that seemed like I'd be ancient then. And I'm like, "Oh, I should have had a longer runway." Because I'm now now it's very much an introspective time where I'm figuring out what's important to me and still staying very busy with a number of projects, but also being very mindful of how I spend my day and how I do that. So I wouldn't say that's my favorite question, but it's something that I have to ask myself a lot.
Yeah.
What's next for you and why are you doing that?
Yeah. That's awesome. What is a book that has changed your perspective? Maybe we answered it in the earlier discussion, but
Yeah, Anti-Fragile as far as a business is concerned was great. Rocket Fuel, which I feel like you recommended to me. Because that was, I've said this a million times, but I was trying to figure out how to grow my company. And I think in talking to you and understanding sort of the core concepts of rocket fuel or the E-Myth or traction, they all are similar books. They talked about who you are as a person. And I never really thought about that in a lot of ways. So I guess Anti-Fragile was starting the company and really not knowing what I wanted to do, but then learning about how rocket fuel or any of those books that you recommended really changed my perspective on leadership and running a company. So I now think about leadership in a much different way than I did before, because to think that a leader is everything is just not true. A leader is a single person who's good at something and is surrounded by other really talented people who can help them succeed, like yourself.
Thank you. All right, last question. If you could go to any concert tomorrow, touring or not, dead or alive, what would it be?
Not going to say Taylor Swift.
Yeah. No, say Taylor. You can say Taylor Swift.
Yeah, good question. I would love to see the Beatles, but I'd probably more lean towards Zeppelin just because I think it'd be a killer concert. Although I think as far as like in their heyday, because they were just such great showmen, it might be Pink Floyd. And I've actually seen Pink Floyd, but I think I was like 7, and I remember it being the coolest thing ever, but I was 7. So I just wish I was a little bit older to appreciate them better. So, and back when they had all the inflatables and like Pink Floyd, they used to be architects, and they designed their theater experience, their show like architects, and it was really unique. So it might be Pink Floyd.
Amazing. All right, we've had a ton of supportive comments in LinkedIn, but no like specific questions. So I'm going to say, let's wrap up. You mentioned you're working on a lot of projects. If there's anything you want to highlight for people, or just let people know where they can best connect with you if they do want to ask some questions or get in touch.
Yeah, obviously my LinkedIn is there. That's the easiest way. Charles at charlesbern.com as well too. And I'm currently working with a company called Bygone Theater. They're an immersive theater company, and we have this new space here. If you're wondering why there's wacky words we're doing some brainstorming for a new experience. And so you can check out the Bygone Theater, probably on Instagram or whatever. And we have a new space at Adelaide and Spadina in downtown Toronto. It's an event and theater space, and we're going to have programming of all sorts here. So we just had a Nuit Blanche event, and we're going to have Halloween party, and we're also doing workshops. And so if you're looking for an interesting venue for different kinds of things, we're very much supportive of artistic endeavors here. So we have and we're very flexible. So this is Bygone Theater is a registered charity, and we've partnered with Ukai Projects, who do artistic, and they're artist anarchists and very interesting and talented people. So it's a great collaboration here in this space. And so if you're looking for a cool venue for anything whatsoever, you can drop me a line.
Super cool. Having been part of some of your previous passion projects that we ran alongside the company, I know how exciting and interesting these are. So yeah, definitely if you're in the Ontario region, you should be checking out Bygone Theater, because I'm sure it's going to be cool. I can't wait to visit next time I'm back. And thank you. Thank you so much for sharing the journey and for being here with us.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for tuning in. Our goal is to create connections and inspire conversations about building great companies. So please subscribe, rate, review, and share this podcast with your network. Sharing is caring. If you're a business leader or executive team ready to take your leadership and company to the next level with high-performing teams, we'd love to see how we can rocket fuel your growth. Check out the show notes to book your free Builders Business Booster call, where you'll receive a strategic leadership assessment and 3 concrete focus areas to mature and grow your business. You'll also find the link to join the Builders Club to stay up to date on upcoming events, get valuable tools and insights, as well as be the first to receive exciting announcements straight to your inbox. No spam, I promise. You'll also find my website, alexsnyder.com, and all the places to peep my creds, hear what clients have to say, and see if I went to the gym today. And one final note, this podcast is not intended to be legal, tax, or other professional advice. Thanks for joining. We'll catch you on the flip side.